Have you ever wondered where the seafood on your plate really comes from? Most of us picture fishermen hauling nets out of stormy oceans, or maybe quiet coastal farms where fish circle in floating cages. But what if I told you that some of the fish we'll eat in the future might actually be raised on a ship the size of a skyscraper? Imagine standing on the deck of a massive vessel, longer than 2 football fields, heavier than even the world's largest aircraft carrier. And instead of jets or cargo containers, it's filled with tanks of living, growing fish. This isn't a science fiction idea or a concept drawing from an expo. It's real. And it's already sailing in the waters off China. Think about that for a second. A moving, floating fish farm that can drift across oceans, avoiding storms, red tides, and pollution, while producing thousands of tons of fresh seafood each year. A ship that doesn't just catch fish, it creates them. So why is China building such enormous seafood factories at sea? What problem are they trying to solve? And could this be the future of food production for the entire world? Let's dive in. To understand why China is building floating fish farms, we first need to look at the sheer scale of the country's appetite. In 1994, an environmental researcher named Lester Brown asked a question that shook the world. Who will feed China? At that time, China's population had just passed 1.1 billion people, and it's now well over 1.4 billion. That's more people than all of Europe combined, and every one of them needs food on the table every single day. China already produces staggering amounts of meat and poultry, roughly 7 billion chickens, 700 million pigs, and tens of millions of cattle and sheep each year. But that's only part of the story. China is also the world's biggest consumer and producer of seafood. Fish, shrimp, crabs. These aren't luxury foods in China. They're daily staples, just as common as bread or rice in the West. In fact, for 30 straight years, China has led the world in aquatic production, providing more than 2/5 of all the fish and seafood humans eat globally. In 2023 alone, the country produced about 71 million tons of aquatic products, nearly half from seawater farming. That number is so huge it's hard to picture. It's like pulling every single person in France, giving them a full ton of fish each and still having leftovers. But here's the catch: population keeps rising, and as living standards improve, people want more protein, especially fresh, high-quality seafood. Meanwhile, wild fish stocks are shrinking, coastal farms are running out of space, and pollution in nearshore waters is getting worse. Traditional fish farming just can't keep up anymore. So the question has changed. It's no longer just, who will feed China? Now it's, how will China feed itself, sustainably, efficiently, and without destroying the environment that provides its food? And that's where an unlikely hero enters the story, a massive steel ship built not to catch fish, but to raise them. On May 20th, 2022, a massive vessel slowly drifted out of a harbor in Qingdao, China. It wasn't a cargo ship, it wasn't a cruise liner, and it wasn't a military vessel, even though it's larger than some aircraft carriers. This was Guoxin No. 1, the world's first and largest fish farming ship. Picture this: nearly 250 meters long and 45 meters wide, this floating fortress of steel weighs about 100,000 tons. To put that in perspective, that's heavier than the USS Gerald R. Ford, America's biggest aircraft carrier. But instead of jet fighters and ammunition, its decks hide 15 massive breeding tanks, enormous water chambers where tens of thousands of fish are raised from tiny fry to full-grown seafood ready for market. Each tank can hold around 90,000 cubic meters of seawater, about the same as 36 Olympic swimming pools. If you were to walk inside, you wouldn't see chaos or noisy machinery. You'd see calm, clear water and quiet humming systems, all designed for one purpose: to raise healthy, high-quality fish in the middle of the ocean. The Chinese engineers behind Guoxin No. 1 call it a mobile seafood worker. Part ship, part farm, part factory. It doesn't chase fish, it cultivates them. When journalists first covered Guoxin number 1, many people thought it sounded like science fiction. But it's not just a concept. It's already operational, and its creators believe this ship represents a whole new chapter in how humanity produces food from the sea. But what makes this ship so special isn't just its size, it's the technology hidden inside its steel walls. From water systems that mimic natural ocean currents to sensors that can recognize individual fish, Guoxin number 1 isn't just big, it's smart. Let's step inside this floating farm and see how it actually works. Stepping inside Guoxin number 1 feels less like boarding a ship and more like entering a futuristic laboratory. Every sound, every ripple of water, and every movement of fish is monitored and controlled with incredible precision. This isn't guesswork or luck. It's science, automation, and data working together to raise fish in the most efficient way possible. At the heart of the ship are 15 giant breeding tanks, each one carefully engineered to recreate the perfect conditions for fish to grow. The ship constantly exchanges its water with the surrounding ocean, up to 16 times a day, ensuring the tanks are always filled with clean, oxygen-rich seawater. Think of it as a living aquarium that never gets dirty, no matter how many fish it holds. Inside, powerful pumps create a gentle rotating flow, imitating natural ocean currents. The water's speed stays between 0.2 and 0.4 meters per second, just right for the fish to swim comfortably without exhausting themselves. Temperature is tightly controlled too, kept between 22 and 26 degrees Celsius, the sweet spot for species like the large yellow croaker, the ship's main crop. But what truly sets Guoxin number 1 apart is its intelligence. Over 2,100 sensors are installed across the ship to track everything: water quality, oxygen levels, even the movement of individual fish. Using advanced cameras and recognition software, these sensors can actually identify fish faces and monitor growth patterns in real time. It's like facial recognition, but for seafood. This level of control lets farmers know exactly when each fish is thriving or stressed, hungry or ready for harvest. And when it's time to feed, automated systems deliver precise portions at scheduled times, minimizing waste and pollution. From stocking fry to catching and freezing mature fish, nearly the entire process is automated. Even the ship's engines are designed with the fish in mind. Instead of using noisy diesel propulsion, Guoxin number 1 runs on a quiet electric system, keeping the onboard noise below 60 decibels, quieter than an average conversation. That matters because fish like the large yellow croaker are extremely sensitive to sound. Too much noise, and they stop eating or even die from stress. All of these systems work together to create an environment where fish can grow faster, healthier, and with survival rates of over 95%. Far above traditional sea cages. It's precision farming on the ocean, powered by algorithms instead of anchors. So, with all this cutting-edge technology, what kind of results does a ship like this actually deliver? Now that we've seen how Guoxin number 1 works, let's talk about what it can actually do. Because honestly, this floating farm isn't just impressive, it's productive. Each year, Guoxin number 1 can raise about 7,400 tons of fish, enough to fill more than 300 Olympic swimming pools or serve millions of family dinners. And here's the jaw-dropping part. The entire operation is run by only 35 crew members. That means every person on board is responsible for more than 200 tons of fish a year. That's the power of automation and precision engineering at sea. Traditional fish farms near the coast often struggle with unpredictable weather, pollution, and slow growth rates. But on this ship, the controlled environment allows fish to mature roughly 1/3 faster than in standard cages. That means Guoxin number 1 can complete 2 full breeding cycles every year, doubling productivity without doubling the space. And the economics are just as striking. The ship's builders estimate its annual output value could reach around 300 million yuan, with profits near 60 million yuan after costs. That's not a small experiment. That's a self-sustaining, scalable business model. Even more impressive, this design isn't meant to stay unique. A second vessel, Guoxin 2-1, is already being built, expected to produce around 8,000 tons of seafood per year. Together, ships like these could form a fleet of ocean-based farms, each one capable of feeding tens of thousands of people with fresh, traceable, and sustainably raised fish. But here's the real question. If the ocean already has plenty of fish, why go through all this trouble and cost to farm them at sea? Why not just keep catching them the old-fashioned way? The answer lies in a growing crisis, one that's reshaping how nations think about the future of food from the ocean. To understand why a nation would build a 100,000-ton ship just to raise fish, we need to look at what's happening beneath the waves. And in the markets. Over the past few decades, wild fish populations have been shrinking fast. Take China's coastal waters as an example. Before 2018, hairtail, a common fish in Chinese markets, was abundant. But since then, catches have dropped sharply, forcing more reliance on imports and farmed fish. In 2022 alone, China imported millions of tons of seafood to meet domestic demand. For a country that once fed itself from its own seas, that's a dramatic shift. Nearshore aquaculture, the old solution, is hitting its limits. The coastlines are crowded with pens and cages, and those enclosed systems can create their own problems. Pollution from waste, oxygen depletion, and outbreaks of disease. Add to that the growing threat of red tides, those toxic algae blooms, and typhoons, and it becomes clear why traditional fish farming is struggling. That's where shipborne aquaculture comes in. A vessel like Guoxin No. 1 can sail to cleaner waters, avoiding pollution zones and storms. It's not anchored to one place, which means it can chase ideal water temperatures or move away from environmental hazards, a kind of climate mobility for aquaculture. By concentrating production offshore, it also reduces pressure on crowded coastlines and wild fish stocks. Instead of catching fewer and fewer wild fish, these ships could grow more of what people eat, efficiently, predictably, and traceably. But there's another side to the story, and it's important not to ignore it. Building and running such massive ships costs hundreds of millions of yuan, so the model is capital intensive. If mismanaged, dense farming in closed tanks could still spread disease or create new ecological challenges if waste isn't properly filtered. Some environmental experts even worry about what happens if dozens of such ships operate in the same area. Could that change local ecosystems or create mobile pollution zones? So this isn't a perfect fix. It's a bold experiment, one that could either relieve the oceans or add new risks to them. The question now isn't just, can we farm fish at sea, but should we, and how responsibly can we scale it? And that brings us to the bigger picture, because China isn't the only country betting on the open ocean. The idea of farming fish far from shore isn't just a Chinese experiment, it's part of a global wave reshaping how humanity produces seafood. Take Norway, for example. Long known for its salmon industry, Norway has begun building deep-sea aquaculture platforms that look more like oil rigs than fish farms. Their goal is similar: raise fish in cleaner, colder, and less crowded waters, far from pollution and parasites that plague nearshore cages. In the United States, research vessels and pilot projects are testing offshore fish pens in the Gulf of Mexico. Even countries like Sweden and Japan are exploring autonomous aquaculture systems that drift with ocean currents, monitored entirely by AI and satellite. China, though, is taking it to another level, scaling up fast. The success of Guoxin No. 1 has already sparked plans for an entire fleet of such vessels. Some estimates suggest dozens could be launched in the next decade, forming a new blue industry fleet designed to operate in international waters. The vision is bold: ships roaming the open seas, each producing thousands of tons of fresh seafood every year, like floating cities of food. But scaling up brings its own set of crossroads. There are two possible futures. In the first, nations coordinate. creating global standards for offshore aquaculture, setting limits on density, ensuring waste treatment, and sharing data to protect ecosystems. In that version of the story, ocean farming becomes a sustainable pillar of global food security, helping feed billions while giving wild fish a chance to recover. In the second, countries rush ahead independently, building bigger fleets, competing for open sea territory, and risking pollution or disease outbreaks without clear oversight. That could trigger not only environmental damage, but even geopolitical tension over who controls which parts of the ocean. A decade from now, we might walk into a supermarket and see three labels side by side: wild caught, shore farmed, and ship farmed. The choice we make as consumers, and the way governments regulate this technology, will decide which version of the future we sail toward. So what does all this mean for you sitting at your dinner table, maybe about to take a bite of grilled fish or sushi? Let's bring the story home. Let's circle back to where we began. When you look down at the seafood on your plate, that tender slice of fish, that grilled fillet, that sushi roll, do you ever wonder where it really came from? Not long ago, the answer was simple. It was caught in the wild or farmed along a coastline. But now, that answer is changing. The next fish you eat might have been born, raised, and harvested aboard a ship the size of a skyscraper, quietly cruising through the open ocean. Projects like Guoxin #1 are more than feats of engineering. They're signals, signs of how quickly our relationship with food, technology, and nature is evolving. Because this isn't just about fish. It's about how we feed billions of people on a planet that's running out of room to grow more food. In the face of overfishing, pollution, and climate uncertainty, ship-borne farms offer a daring idea: take food production off the land and into the sea. But do it intelligently, sustainably, and responsibly. It's a vision that could redefine the global seafood industry. Or, if handled carelessly, repeat the same mistakes that damaged our coasts. So maybe the real question isn't, can we farm fish on a ship? We already can. The question is, can we do it right? Because whether you live in Shanghai, San Francisco, or Stockholm, the choices made about ocean farming will shape what ends up on your plate and how healthy our oceans remain. So here's your call to action. If you care about food, the planet, and the future of innovation, subscribe to follow this story as it unfolds. In upcoming episodes, we'll dive deeper, inside the tanks, into the economics, and across the environmental debates shaping the next frontier of aquaculture. And before you go, drop a thought in the comments. Would you eat fish raised on a ship? Because ready or not, the era of floating farms has already begun. And what we decide now will ripple across the world's oceans for decades to come.